Oh, that's the end. Okay. We did it. All right, let's talk about the ups and downs of Enotria, the last song, shall we? And there are many of both. So let's start here. I am a huge Souls-like fan, and there aren't but a couple I've ever played that I just straight up did not enjoy. And so this would have to be pretty horrible for me not to enjoy it. And it's not horrible. I did enjoy it. In fact, there are certain things about this game that I think are excellent. Probably the first thing that comes to mind, and one of the things that's so important for Souls-likes and so undersung, is level design. This game has that spaghetti bowl labyrinthine like maze of corridors level design that you love to see in something like a Dark Souls game or Bloodborne or something like that. Certain areas of Elden Ring and stuff like that. They have gotten closer than most at getting as good as the FromSoft formula at making awesome, very complex level design without being like ridiculous. Most of the good Souls likes don't quite get there, except for FromSoft. They always get there. So it's good. You walk into it, you'll come up on a town and it looks like a whole city, and sure enough you can go through that whole city, and that's a really cool, and it's just as complex and more complicated than a real city would be, right? Because everything's all interconnected and stuff like that. It's also got an interesting bend with its linearity in that it's more, not quite like Demon Souls, because Demon Souls you can kind of do in any order, period. But this one, there's like, you've got choices you can make. You can do certain areas in different orders. And those areas, again, aren't linear at all. There's a lot of weaving and ducking and optional bosses and all kinds of stuff you can do before you get to the main boss of that zone. So all that's very, very cool. I think the level design and the way that the game is built as far as progression, those are the biggest strong points. The combat's fun. The boss fights, some of them were excellent. Some of them were very hard. Most of them were pretty easy. We'll get to that in a second. But some of them were very hard, and the ones that were hard were pretty good. Actually, my favorite boss in the whole game was an optional boss fight that I got because there's a perk that you get for killing that boss that I really wanted, and so I went off the beaten path and did an optional boss fight, and it was really, really good. So I think that's the main stuff. Now let's talk about the combat. The combat I wouldn't put in the good or bad category. It's when it comes to the actual core combat, it's got a parry mechanic that works pretty well. The standard heavy attack, light attack stuff is very, very Souls-like. It's very FromSoftware, the way that it all works. I would definitely call this a true Souls-like. It's got all of the hallmarks of a Souls-like. And the combat is no different. It's very Souls-like. It's not perfect though. The dodge roll mechanic is underpowered. You can't roll very far. The iframes are limited, and the enemies, most of the bosses especially, have a level of their hitboxes are all way bigger than they are, and so the dodge roll isn't that good. And so because of that, you have to we're not doing New Game Plus. Because of that, you have to learn to parry in certain situations. You just have to, because the dodge is not very dependable. It doesn't seem like it was designed that way. It seems like the dodge roll was designed. In fact, there are skills and stuff around the dodge roll, so it definitely seems like the dodge roll was designed to be useful. And it's not useless, but it's not as useful as it feels like it was intended to be. So the combat's a little bit of a mixed bag. The story is another one I'd put in the like C tier. Like, it's not particularly good or bad. The imagery and the world and the lore and all that stuff seems cool. all that looks very cool. The tone of the world, everything being like in midday, is an interesting change of pace for a Souls like. And the way that the costumes all look, and the way that the bosses look and everything, that's all very good. Like the art design is very good. But the story itself it's fine. It's you know, it's not as cryptic as a lot of Souls likes, but it's still kind of cryptic. Honestly, it's a story that has been done before, and so let's go ahead and go into that, and we'll go into the downsides, and we'll start with the story and the basic combat mechanics. Well, not the story really. It's kind of part of the story. This whole thing is about the fact that you are, and tell me if you've heard this one before, you are a maskless being, and you have to go out into the world, and as you fight enemies, you get their aspects, you get their masks, and you can equip all this stuff. Hello, Mortal Shell, Deathbound. There have been, especially, it seems like lately, a lot of games like that. It is a thing that Souls-likes have done several times now. Lords of the Fallen did a thing like that. It's played. It's a trope that is a bit tired at this point. And so when I found out that that's what we were doing, I was like, ugh, I just played a game like this. I've played 2 other games like this already this year that are Souls-likes. Is that really is that FromSoft hasn't done that. This is something that other people trying to make Souls-likes have just made up, and it's getting boring. It's getting old. I don't know why we're continuing to see this mechanic. It's fine. There are some interesting parts with how it works, but it's just played and tired. Now let's get into the real problems. First of all, this game is a buggy fucking mess. There are multiple bosses that glitched out to the point that I had to restart the game. There were multiple points where the game just crashed. I want to say 5 or 6 that the game just completely crashed, and I had to quit out and start over. There were multiple points where you would fall down a ledge, and FromSoft figured out how to fix this 10 years ago. But there are a couple of Souls-likes that do it where you'll fall on a ledge, but you won't fall to your death. You'll just fall on a ledge that you can't get out of, so you have to eventually jump to your death. But then when you do, your souls end up on that ledge, and you just can't get to them. So if you fall down there onto that ledge with 100,000 souls, they are gone, and there's no way for you to get them back. That Another Crab's Treasure did that too, and then like Demon Souls, there were some times we could do that. But by Dark Souls, they figured that out, how to fix that. And it happened a lot in this game, and it was extremely infuriating. I lost a lot of souls because of that garbage. That's unacceptable. They should fix that. What's also unacceptable is that boss fights, including the final boss, would just glitch out, where they just would stop moving. And which is, it's one thing for a boss to glitch out and it's like, oh, well, here we go. And you just hit him until he died. No. When he did it, you couldn't hit him. So I just had to start over, and I had almost killed him. I was definitely going to kill him. So regular enemies would walk up to you, start attacking, and then just freeze. It was a lot of that. Also, when it comes to the gameplay mechanics of this game, you've got your regular attacks. They give you a ton of weapons, which is cool. Lots of different equipment that you can upgrade and things like that. You don't have armor, things like that, but you have like the masks, you have these aspects, you have perks, you have you have weapons, and you can upgrade a lot of them, and that's all very cool. But a lot of it was worthless. A lot of the weapons were, I question why they even existed, which is true in some Souls-likes and in FromSoft games and stuff sometimes too, which is not that big a deal. But the bigger problem was that the special abilities, which are called line charges, I think, in this game, they were basically worthless. I never used them because they took forever to charge up. They would reset when you started a boss battle, so you'd have to charge it up during the boss battle. They took forever, and most of them did garbage damage. Now, part of that is probably because it's like a battle mage, it's like a magic thing, and if you don't, and I was a melee guy, so, but because I was a melee guy, that whole part of the game was just gone. In something like Black Myth Wukong, where they have a lot of extra abilities, you can put your levels wherever you want, and it doesn't render an entire portion of the game meaningless. Those spells were completely useless. And on top of being weak, if you would try to use one and you got interrupted, the charge up for it was just gone, and you had to recharge it up, and it took forever to charge most of them up. So I just ignored that whole part of the game, and I did fine doing that. Most of the bosses weren't that hard. Oh, and let's talk about the number one biggest problem in this game, and it does have to do with the combat as well. There is an elemental system in this game, like there is in a lot of these. Like, people are fire, bolt, thunder. You know, there's a thunder boss or a water boss or stuff like that. This game had that too, but it was poison. Basically, it was poison, fire, drunk, like alcohol, and a holy. They had different Italian names, but that's basically what they were. And the poison one, Milano, is extremely overpowered to the point that anytime you fought, I had a weapon that I got very early in the game that was a poison Milano weapon, and it absolutely destroyed everything it touched, unless you were fighting a poison elemental Milano elemental boss, which did come up several times, and those bosses were easily the hardest bosses in the game. And it wasn't because they were like really good bosses or anything. It was because there was no way to use any kind of elemental real weakness against them. And some of the other the elemental stuff does weird stuff in this game, like where if you get an enemy drunk, they'll do more damage and they have more stamina, but they also take more damage, which on paper sounds really interesting. But honestly, why would you want to give a boss that status effect? Poison just does damage over time. It's obviously very good. Giving a boss, hitting them enough to make them stronger but also take more damage, what's the point in really even working toward that? I tried all the other elemental stuff. It was garbage compared to Milano, the poison element. It just melted through every other enemy, unless you fought a poison boss which couldn't be poisoned, and then you were in for a bad time, because even then it still didn't make sense to use any of the other elemental stuff. So I ended up getting a weapon very, very early in this game that just absolutely destroyed everything it touched, except for poison enemies. And then I would always have a hard time with those, but it wasn't like, oh, this is a really good game, I'm really struggling because it's so like, the combat's so complex. It wasn't that. It was just that whenever you fought one of those bosses, they would take forever to kill, and they would hit you really hard, and they would poison you every time they hit you. So the balance in this game was absolute trash. It was so poorly balanced. Honestly, at the end of the day, the way that I feel about this game at this moment is that there's a good game in there somewhere, but there is so much garbage piled on top of it that I don't think I would recommend this to a Souls-like fan with confidence. I think, if you're one of those people that has to play every Souls-like, then of course you would want to. And it's not the worst Souls-like I've ever played, probably. Actually, I have to think about that. But, it's not the worst one I've ever beaten, because there's a couple that I have given up on. But it's so bad in certain areas that it's not really recommendable unless you're really, really into Souls-likes. That would be my opinion. It's so buggy. It's so poorly balanced. There's so much going on in it that's just absolutely unnecessary. It's so blasé when it comes to the story. It's so forgettable. There's a couple of diamonds in the rough buried deep down in there. The level design, the art design, and some aspects of a couple of the boss fights. But other than that, this game is an absolute mess. It's a mess. This game is messy as hell. So I don't think I could recommend it. I did enjoy it, though, because it's a Souls-like, and I enjoy every Souls-like. So it's going to get a higher ranking than it deserves, because I still enjoyed it, because it's a Souls-like. But it has got so much wrong with it that I don't think I can recommend it with a straight face, unless you're just one of those people that has to play every Souls-like on Earth, which those people do exist. I'm one of them. All right. That's it. Last couple orders of business here before we sign off. The bottom center of the screen says that we have beaten 86 games in 2024 and 533 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers are now lying to you. We've now beaten 87 games in 2024 and 534 since we started doing this in 2020. Let's go. All right, last order of business. Enotria. I did have a good time playing you, and I'm glad that I did. I hope that you get some patches, and I hope that you get maybe a sequel with some lessons learned. But until then, we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye. Appreciate you.